Imagine this, the morning of May 29th, 1453. The sun rises over Constantinople, the jewel of Christendom, the last flam of Rome, a city that had withstood centuries of war. Its mighty walls, once thought unbreakable, cast long shadows over a city filled with fear, prayer, and defiance. But by nightfall, those walls will lie broken, the city will burn, and the Roman Empire, a civilization that began with Romulus and Remus nearly 2,000 years earlier, will breathe its final breath. This is not just the story of a city's fall, this is the day Rome finally died. For more than 1,000 years, Constantinople had stood as the bridge between East and West. Founded by Constantine the Great in the year 330, it became the beating heart of the Byzantine Empire, the eastern half of Rome that outlived its western twin. Surrounded by massive triple walls, laced with towers, and protected by the waters of the Golden Horn, it was considered the impregnable city, the city of emperors, saints, and treasures. But by the 15th century, Byzantium was no longer the empire of Justinian or Basil the Bulgar slayer. What remained was a fragment of its former glory, a struggling city-state, battered, depopulated, and surrounded by enemies. And among those enemies stood one power above all, the Ottoman Empire, led by a young sultan with an unshakable will, Mehmed II, just 21 years old but burning with destiny. Mehmed was no ordinary ruler. He dreamed of being more than a sultan. He dreamed of being the new Caesar, the man who would take the Second Rome and make it his own. By the mid-1400s, the Byzantine Empire had shrunk to almost nothing. Once stretching across North Africa, Italy, and the Middle East, it now clung only to Constantinople and a few scraps of land in Greece. Inside the city, the population had dwindled to perhaps 50,000 souls, a fraction of its 1 million-strong golden age. The great Hagia Sophia still towered in splendor, but poverty, decay, and fear haunted the streets. And beyond the walls, the Ottomans grew stronger by the day. Under Mehmed's leadership, they had built a war machine unlike anything Constantinople had ever faced. His armies were vast, his ships deadly, and his technology cutting edge. Among his most terrifying weapons, the great cannons of Orban, monstrous bronze beasts that could hurl stone balls weighing over half a ton. Weapons that could do what centuries of sieges had failed to achieve, break the walls of Constantinople. In April 1453, the horizon darkened with banners. Mehmed's forces surrounded the city, estimates say between 80,000 to 100,000 men, against perhaps 7,000 defenders within the walls. The defenders were led by the last emperor of Byzantium, Constantine XI Palaiologos, a man who knew the odds but refused to surrender. His name echoed that of the city's founder, and fate had cast him as the empire's final guardian. The siege began. Day after day, the thunder of Mehmed's cannons shook the ground. Massive stone balls smashed into the ancient walls, sending dust and rubble into the air. At night, fires burned across the skyline. Priests carried icons through the streets, calling on divine protection. Ordinary citizens, men, women, even children, joined soldiers on the walls, patching cracks, hauling stones, and praying for a miracle. And yet, the walls still held. For weeks, the ancient defenses of Constantinople resisted the full might of the Ottoman war machine. But Mehmed was patient, and he had no intention of failing. The key to Constantinople's survival had always been the Golden Horn, the great harbor shielded by a massive chain that blocked enemy ships. But in a stroke of genius, Mehmed ordered his men to drag ships over land, rolling them on greased logs, across hills, and into the Golden Horn itself. Suddenly, Ottoman galleys appeared in waters the Byzantines thought untouchable. Panic swept the city. Now Constantinople was attacked on every side, land and sea. The noose was tightening. Supplies dwindled. Morale faltered. And then came the final assault. On the night of May 28th, the people of Constantinople gathered in the Hagia Sophia. By candlelight, priests led processions, citizens prayed, and Emperor Constantine himself knelt before the altar, knowing it would likely be his last night alive.
At dawn, the Ottomans launched their all-out attack. Waves of soldiers surged against the battered walls, janissaries, the Sultan's elite warriors, driven by faith and fury. The clash was apocalyptic. The roar of cannons, the screams of battle, the cries of the dying. For hours the defenders held, but exhaustion in numbers took their toll. And then fate struck. At a breach near the gate of St. Romanus, the walls finally gave way. The defenders broke. Chaos swept the city. Emperor Constantine, the last Roman emperor, is said to have thrown off his imperial regalia and charged into the fray, fighting to the death alongside his soldiers. His body was never found. By mid-morning, Constantinople had fallen. The city was sacked. The Hagia Sophia, once the greatest church in Christendom, was transformed into a mosque. Survivors were enslaved, treasures plundered, and the ancient streets ran in blood. But beyond the horror of that day lay a greater truth. The Roman Empire, born in the 8th century BC, was no more. For 1123 years after the fall of the West, the Byzantines had carried the torch of Rome. But on that May morning, in 1453, that torch was finally extinguished. For Christians in Europe, it was a day of mourning. For Muslims across the Islamic world, it was a triumph. And for Mehmed II, now known as the Conqueror, it was the fulfillment of destiny. He entered the city as its new ruler, prostrated himself in the Hagia Sophia, and declared Constantinople his new capital. And thus the Ottoman Empire rose on the ruins of Byzantium, dominating the region for centuries to come. The fall of Constantinople was more than the end of a city. It was the death of antiquity, the final closing of the Roman story, and the dawn of a new age. The Renaissance, the age of exploration, the shifting tides of global power, all were influenced by the fall of that one city on the Bosporus. Rome had not died with the sack of the West in 476. It had not died with the Crusades or the Mongols. It died here, on May 29, 1453. When the crescent banner rose over the Hagia Sophia, and the dream of Rome was no more. If you found this story as haunting and powerful as I did, don't forget to subscribe to Secrets of History, where we bring the past to life, one epic tale at a time. And if you want to know what came next in Europe's darkest chapter, click the end screen now to watch my video on the Black Death, the plague that killed millions. Because history never ends. It only waits for us to uncover it.